Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because stories like this one rarely get told in full. What you see on television is often a performance, a role shaped by cameras, lighting, and expectation. But what happens when the studio goes dark and the microphones turn off? Tonight, we're stepping away from the headlines and into a quieter space, one few people ever imagine when they think about Laura Ingraham. Beyond the sharp political commentary and confident presence lies a deeply personal story of loneliness, survival, and choice. This is not a story about ideology or debate. It's a story about motherhood, loss, and the life a woman built when life refused to follow the script she was given. Laura Ingraham is known as one of the most influential voices in American media, but behind that public image exists a private world shaped by 3 children, each born thousands of miles away, each carrying a past marked by absence. What she chose to do with her life after illness, heartbreak, and disappointment reveals a side of her most people never stop to consider. There's a moment every night that no audience ever sees. The moment when the studio lights shut off, the applause fades, and Laura Ingraham walks away from the controlled chaos of television into something far quieter. No producers, no talking points, no debate, just a home where 3 children wait for her. This contrast between public intensity and private stillness has defined her adult life in ways few understand. While viewers know her as decisive and unyielding, the Laura who walks through her front door steps into a role that offers no applause and no script. Motherhood, especially single motherhood, demands presence, patience, and vulnerability. It's in those moments, helping with homework, listening to fears, or sharing dinner, that her real life unfolds. And unlike her career, this part of her world was never planned for publicity. It grew quietly, deliberately, and against expectations. Laura didn't arrive at this life by accident. She arrived through a series of choices shaped by pain, resilience, and an understanding that waiting for perfect circumstances often means missing the moment entirely. Long before she became a mother, Laura Ingraham carried a quiet longing she rarely admitted, even to herself. She watched friends build families, celebrate milestones, and live lives that followed familiar patterns. Marriage, children, shared futures. For someone who thrived in competitive academic and professional environments, there was an unspoken ache in realizing that personal fulfillment didn't always follow achievement. Despite her success, something essential felt unfinished. Yet the world around her sent a clear message. Motherhood was supposed to come after marriage, not instead of it. As years passed and relationships came and went, Laura faced a reality many women confront but few discuss openly: the fear that time might quietly close a door you assumed would always remain open. She didn't speak publicly about it, but that desire never disappeared. Instead, it waited. And when the moment finally arrived, it came in a form she never expected, far from the familiar streets of America, inside a place where children waited not for opportunity, but for someone willing to choose them. In 2008, Laura Ingraham traveled to Guatemala, not as a media figure, but as a woman standing at the edge of a life-changing decision. Inside a modest orphanage stood a 3-year-old girl holding a plastic bag containing everything she owned. Her name was Maria Caroline. Born in 2005, she had lost both parents early in life and spent her formative years in institutional care. For Maria, adults came and went. Promises rarely stayed. When Laura first saw her, she noticed something beyond her silence, a guarded awareness common in children who have learned not to expect much. That recognition struck deeply. Laura would later describe those days as some of the most meaningful of her life. The bond formed not through words but through presence. Maria spoke Spanish. Laura spoke English. Yet somehow, trust grew between them, built slowly through shared effort and patience. Adoption was not just paperwork or logistics. It was the moment Laura chose to step fully into a life of responsibility, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. Bringing Maria home meant rebuilding a world for both of them. Laura went from a structured, career-focused life to navigating the emotional needs of a grieving child, adjusting to a new culture, language, and identity. Maria had lost everything familiar. Laura understood that love alone wouldn't be enough, so she adapted. She learned Spanish to help bridge the gap. She adjusted her schedule, her priorities, and her sense of self. Every small milestone, first conversations, school experiences, shared routines became a victory. Maria wasn't just learning English. She was learning what stability felt like. And Laura wasn't just parenting. She was redefining herself. Over time, Maria's quiet reserve softened. She grew into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman, eventually graduating high school in 2023 and heading to Texas A&M to study nursing. Her choice of career reflected something deeper, empathy born from knowing loss. Maria wasn't just Laura's first child. She was the proof that family could be built through intention, not tradition. Many would have stopped after one adoption, especially as a single parent with a demanding career. But Laura felt something shift after Maria entered her life. The fear of doing too much was replaced by the fear of leaving love unexplored. When the opportunity arose to adopt again, she didn't hesitate, even though the process would be harder. In 2008, geopolitical tensions between the United States and Russia were already complicating international adoption. Rules changed constantly. Delays stretched endlessly, and single parents faced intense scrutiny. Yet Laura chose to move forward. She believed that children shouldn't suffer because adults failed to agree. That belief wasn't ideological. It was personal. She had already seen how fragile opportunity could be, and she knew that if she waited for certainty, it might never come. Michael Dimitri Ingraham was born in June 2008. By the time Laura met him, he was just over a year old. The journey to bring him home tested every part of her resolve. Paperwork stalled. Requirements changed. Political tension hung over every step, yet she refused to abandon the process. When she finally held Michael, the moment carried the weight of everything she had endured: illness, heartbreak, and the fear of failure. Michael grew into a curious, energetic child, full of warmth and enthusiasm. He represented something powerful, proof that love could cross borders even when politics tried to close them. Laura protected his privacy fiercely, insisting that her children deserved normalcy. By his teenage years, Michael lived a life far removed from cameras, shaped not by public opinion but by stability and care. By the time Laura began the process to adopt again, many questioned her decision. 3 children, 3 countries, 1 parent. But doubt had never stopped her before. Nikolai Peter Ingraham was born in Moscow in 2010. His early life remains largely unknown, not out of secrecy but necessity. International adoption often leaves gaps that can never be filled. When Laura pursued his adoption in 2011, the window was closing fast. Russia would soon ban American adoptions entirely. Agencies hesitated. Governments delayed. Still, she pressed forward. Nikolai was young, vulnerable, and required protection more than publicity. Bringing him home meant reshaping the family dynamic once again. But Laura believed love wasn't a finite resource. It expanded with commitment. Raising 3 adopted children alone required more than determination. It required constant adjustment. Each child carried a different history, culture, and emotional landscape. Laura worked to honor those differences while building unity. She encouraged connection to their roots, not as something separate, but as something valuable. She maintained discipline without rigidity, structure without coldness. Most importantly, she protected their privacy. Fame was never allowed to define their childhood. Nikolai, especially, grew up almost entirely outside public view. Laura believed that children should never pay the price for a parent's visibility. And so, she built a home centered on routine, values, and presence rather than headlines. Paragraph 10. Illness changed everything. Understand Laura's choices, you must understand 2005. That was the year everything stopped. A routine checkup led to a diagnosis of aggressive breast cancer. At 41, she faced surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. Her engagement quietly ended. The future she assumed would arrive simply disappeared. But illness brought clarity. Laura emerged changed. She no longer believed in waiting for life to happen. She believed in choosing it. Cancer didn't make her fragile. It made her decisive. Motherhood was no longer something she postponed for ideal conditions. It became something she pursued with intention. Despite holding traditional views about family and responsibility, Laura Ingraham's personal life unfolded in a way that defied those expectations. Over the years, she was linked to several high-profile figures, relationships that attracted media attention and public speculation. Yet none of them resulted in marriage. To outsiders, this became a talking point, sometimes even a punchline. But behind the headlines was a quieter truth. Laura didn't avoid commitment. She simply refused to settle into a life that didn't feel honest. After her cancer diagnosis in 2005, the idea of waiting for a perfect relationship lost its meaning. Time no longer felt unlimited. Instead of seeing marriage as a requirement for fulfillment, she began to see it as one possible path among many. What mattered more was purpose. She realized that love could exist outside formal structures, and that motherhood did not need to be delayed until society approved of her circumstances. This shift wasn't rebellion. It was clarity. And that clarity gave her the freedom to choose a different kind of family, built not on tradition, but on intention and responsibility. As Laura moved deeper into international adoption, she encountered a reality far harsher than she expected. What she believed should be a purely humanitarian process was increasingly shaped by politics, mistrust, and retaliation between governments. Each form, inspection, and interview carried an unspoken tension. Children were no longer just children. They were statistics, leverage, and symbols in larger diplomatic disputes. Laura saw firsthand how quickly policies could change, how one incident could lead to sweeping restrictions that punished thousands of innocent children. This disturbed her deeply. She spoke openly about how wrong it felt that a child's future could depend on international relations rather than compassion. For Laura, adoption was not charity or ideology. It was moral responsibility. She had held children who were waiting without understanding why they were waiting. She had seen hope rise and fall with government signatures. These experiences pushed her to use her platform, not to score political points, but to remind people that real lives were caught in the middle. To her, adoption should have been sacred ground, untouched by power struggles. When Russia officially banned American adoptions in 2013, Laura felt a wave of relief and grief at the same time. Relief because she had managed to bring both Michael and Nikolai home just before the door closed. Grief because she knew countless families weren't as fortunate. Many parents had already met the children they hoped to adopt, bonded with them, promised them homes, only to be told it was over. Those children were sent back to orphanages with no explanation. Laura spoke about this with visible emotion, emphasizing that these were not abstract policy outcomes. They were broken promises made to children who had already experienced abandonment. She argued that one tragedy should never justify condemning thousands of children to institutional life. Her advocacy during this period wasn't loud or performative. It was steady, persistent, and deeply personal. She understood that if timing had shifted even slightly, her own family might never have existed as it did. Throughout every stage of her journey, Laura's Catholic faith remained a quiet but constant presence. She didn't wear it loudly or use it as a public shield, but she acknowledged that without it, navigating illness, loneliness, and single motherhood would have felt unbearable. Faith gave her a framework for endurance when answers were unclear. It helped her accept uncertainty without surrendering hope. Inside her home, faith translated into daily values rather than rigid rules. She taught her children gratitude, personal responsibility, and reflection. She encouraged them to recognize blessings, even on difficult days. Faith became less about doctrine and more about grounding, a way to remain steady when life felt unpredictable. For Laura, belief wasn't about control. It was about trust, especially during moments when control slipped away. Laura never pretended that raising 3 children alone was easy. In fact, she openly admitted it was the hardest challenge of her life. There were no shortcuts, no shared nights of exhaustion, no partner to divide responsibilities with. Every decision, every discipline, every worry rested on her shoulders alone. Balancing a demanding public career with private motherhood meant constant sacrifice. There were moments of doubt, moments when the weight felt overwhelming. But she refused to let struggle turn into bitterness or entitlement. She believed children needed structure, not indulgence, guidance, not excuses. Her parenting style emphasized resilience over comfort, independence over dependency. She didn't aim to raise children who felt protected from the world, but children prepared to face it. By 2025, Laura's children had grown into individuals shaped by very different beginnings and shared stability. Maria, the eldest, carried empathy rooted in early loss and channeled it into a desire to help others through nursing. Michael, energetic and curious, grew into adolescence with confidence, shaped by consistency rather than chaos. Nikolai, the youngest, developed quietly, shielded from attention and given space to grow without labels. Laura never tried to make their stories identical. She respected their differences. What united them wasn't origin, but belonging. Each child knew they were chosen, not once, but every day through effort, protection, and presence. Laura Ingraham's story challenges common definitions of strength. Strength in her life didn't appear as dominance or control. It appeared as persistence, as patience during endless paperwork, as emotional availability after long workdays, as choosing love repeatedly even when exhaustion whispered otherwise. She didn't build her family quickly or easily. She built it deliberately. And that kind of strength rarely makes headlines, but it changes lives. Public opinion never guided Laura's decisions. She understood that approval is temporary and often conditional. Instead, she focused on living in alignment with her values. That meant accepting criticism, misunderstanding, and judgment without allowing them to dictate her path. She didn't need her life to make sense to everyone. It only needed to make sense to her and the children who depended on her. In that freedom, she found peace. Paragraph 19, The Quiet Legacy. When history looks back on Laura Ingraham, it may focus on her career, her influence, or her controversies. But her truest legacy exists away from screens and studios. It lives in a home shaped by stability, in children who grew up knowing they were wanted, protected, and believed in. It lives in bedtime routines, school milestones, and private moments no audience ever saw. That legacy is quiet, but it is enduring. So now the question returns to you. Was Laura Ingraham's decision to raise 3 adopted children on her own an act of courage? Or was it simply the life she was always meant to live once she stopped waiting for permission? Was it bravery, destiny, or perhaps both? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story gave you a new perspective, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more deeply human stories that exist beyond headlines and assumptions.